Do the right thing. It's a phrase that often is used in order to be able to garner support or to be able to describe a situation where you're being asked to go do something. It can be used both genuinely and disingenuously. Both are options. Today on the Practicing Leader podcast, we're going to talk about the phrase, what does it mean, as well as what are some times you just shouldn't use it. I'm your host, Brul Bhargava, and let's discuss. Let's go ahead and start off with a very simple example. A long time ago, I used to run an operations team that was responsible for our infrastructure for inventory for a small company of around 250, 300 people. Sometimes after the software was deployed, you'd have an issue with the inventory system and we would have to respond to those issues. And I, like many others on my team, would wear pagers. Yes, and I said it, pagers. And we would get paged and we would then need to go figure out what was going on. One night our servers went offline, something happened, and in the middle of the night, I got up, I drove down to our data center, helped bring the systems online, and I ended up sleeping in late. What ended up happening was that the next morning when they were discussing what had occurred, I wasn't there to present the information. And what I learned from my mentor of many years was while it was important for me to be there to help solve and help bring those servers back online, it actually was the priority for me to actually be in the room to be able to explain what happened and let my team take care of those things. And that's a very simplistic example of where you say, go do the right thing. The right thing in this case happened to do with priority versus importance. Once we leave the realm of priority and importance, now you can get into discussions about whether something is in fact correct or incorrect. When someone says, do the right thing, in what context are they actually saying it? Often when that phrase is used, it's used to convey the importance of something and to describe why somebody should go do something, meaning it's the right thing for you to go do task X. But what often is missing from that statement is either perspective or role or scope of influence or some other aspects of the statement that are being left out. For example, when we look at individual contributors, they're doing their best to be able to meet their customers' expectations. Their leads are looking to figure out how do they best deliver on the program that they own and be able to deliver on the results that they need to. And managers are looking at it from the perspective of what's best for their team. When we start looking at doing the right thing, we need to be considerate of the right thing may be different on who is asking and where it's being asked from, and which context they're asking us to consider what doing the right thing is. When I think about it from a manager's perspective or as a leader's perspective, you're looking at maybe work-life balance, maybe you're looking to reduce context switching, maybe you're looking to do better load balancing across the team. There are different aspects you would consider when you're looking at what do the right thing is, using air quotes. What is the right thing there is going to be dependent upon the person that is actually asking the question. When you think about the context of the question of do the right thing or can you do the right thing, you have to be aware of what the context is that the person is actually requesting that of you. Is that in context of you individually, you in context of a smaller team, you in context of an organization, a company, or the customer, or a sales associate, or the different role you might be playing? Each of these things has a slightly different inflection or different pivot point of where something that is right its definition could change depending on whom you ask. That talks about the concept of doing the right thing. Let's talk about an example of how you could do this correctly. When you're having discussions with your colleagues or with a partner or with a customer, when you use the phrase do the right thing, you should be using that phrase in context of what is in it for them. If you're using that phrase to talk about what's in it for you, you are kind of missing the mark of the purpose of the statement. Let's talk about an example of how you could use the phrase do the right thing and use it in a way that maintains your integrity and maintains the relationship in the long term. If you use the phrase do the right thing and you're framing the benefits in context of the other person and taking their beliefs and understanding into account, you're using that phrase correctly. If you're using that phrase and you're framing it in context of your own interests, you're actually not saying do the right thing. What you're actually saying is do it my way. And you're simply using more flowery language to convey that rather than stating exactly what it is. Some things to consider is, are you sharing all the facts? Are you being generous both with your time and with your information? Are you conveying the information necessary so that way the other individual can make an informed decision so that way they can do the right thing and they do it with their eyes wide open? It's the idea of when you go buy a car, you actually want to feel like you bought a car, not just that you've been sold a car. And it's a very subtle distinction that is being made here of, do they feel good about the decision after it's done? If they don't feel good about the decision afterwards, don't worry, it'll come back to bite you. Now, the other side of the equation. Now, let's say someone says, do the right thing, and now someone is trying to make their interests above yours. How do you deal with that? What do you do? Here are a couple steps you can take in order to be able to try to navigate that difficult scenario, because it's going to happen. People use these phrases in order to be able to try to move you in a direction, but they may not be providing you all the information. This is where being curious and engaging with individuals is going to be your best strategy. So, for example, ask questions. Be curious about what's going on. Seek clarity. Ask the person, what do you mean when you say do the right thing? Can you give me more information about that? Can you describe what are some of the downfalls, some of the pitfalls we'll run into if we go ahead and we do it your way? I'm open to the idea, but I'd like to get more information. Be curious and ask questions, and ask follow-up questions. There's nothing wrong with that. It's entirely possible that the thing that you understood might be incorrect. It might be like, oh wow, I didn't read it that way, or I didn't understand it that way. Thank you for taking the time to explain it to me. By being curious, it'll allow you to be able to get down to the bottom of the issue and then figure out, okay, where am I in this? Am I in the right spot? Have I asked the right questions? Have I done the right things? And am I going to achieve the result that I need to achieve? Look for alternatives. Try to find out what are the different pivot points that are available in the solution that they provided. Look for ways for you to be able to figure out, is this the right solution? Is that the right solution? And look for options for, can I change how often something happens? Can I change the duration of how something happens? Can I change some other element of this in order to be able to help it meet your requirements as well? But the important piece here is to continue the conversation with the individual to help bring them along in the conversation. And lastly, be open to the conversation. Don't walk in and dig your heels in. That's the last thing you want to do. Even though the person may have used the phrase in not exactly the way you would have done it, that's okay. Be open to hearing their side of the story, hearing exactly what their interests are. Figure out, is there common ground? Is there a way for you to be able to meet the requirements that you need, meet the requirements that they need, and find a common win-win scenario here? As long as you remain open-minded, you have an opportunity to try to figure out, how are you going to get an outcome that truly is doing the right thing for everybody? One of the phrases I use when I have conversations with individuals when they're going through challenging situations is, do you want to be right or do you want to do right? That is a fundamental thing you need to keep front and center when you're having discussions, especially when you're using terms like do the right thing. Try to remember that being right doesn't have a lot of value. Can give you a temporary kind of bump in how you feel about the situation. But really, if you're not coming up with a solution that's actually doing the right thing at the end of the day, you're kind of missing the entire point. When you're trying to practice leadership and you're trying to help others be better and trying to come up with a better result overall for everybody, that means actually doing what's best for everybody. And sometimes that does result in something that is less optimal for you, but more optimal for everyone. And you have to be open to that idea. And if you're not, again, you're missing the entire point. There are times in my history where I have had to make decisions which were not necessarily great for me, but probably best for my team. An example I can give is once I was approached whether or not I wanted to structure my team differently to allow people on my team to have a longer term career path, where certain individuals had shown an aptitude for being program managers, and did I want to provide that opportunity to others? And did I want to segment my team where I had two different disciplines, and I would be asked to give up one of the disciplines and maintain the other? It effectively cut my team down to a quarter of the size, but it allowed the members of my team to have a long-term career path, which allowed them to be able to grow. And the decision I made was, yes, that makes sense from an organizational perspective, from a talent perspective, from a growth perspective for my people. The decision I made was in context of what was for my people versus what was for me. This is where, when you talk about doing the right thing, you need to remember what doing the right thing actually means and not forget that being right and doing right are two separate things. As you figure out how to do the right thing, keep in mind that you want to be open to discussion, be curious, and engage with the people that you're working with to figure out how do you find out that right outcome for everyone. Be the one that brings everyone together, be the practicing leader. Be the one that actually shows how you can bring everyone together and build consensus for the right outcomes for everyone. This was the Practicing Leader podcast. I'm your host, Prul Bhargava, and I'll talk to you next week.